Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hi. I think we're probably going to get started. It's a little after 4, and there might be a couple of people still coming in, but let's get started. Because we have about 50 minutes to talk to this amazing panel of women scientists and engineers that we have here today. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Claire Bambra, and I'm a chemistry professor at Brookhaven College. I'm also a fellow of the STEM Institute, and I'm a faculty mentor. A little bit of my background: I came to academia after working as an engineer in Telecom Corridor and a fiber optic startup company. And before that, I did postdoc work at UTD. I'm a chemist by training. So that's a little bit about me. We have an amazing panel here today, and I was reading their bios. I'm not going to read them out because I think you all have copies of them, and so you can read them yourselves. But what amazed me as I was reading through the bios is we have a complete range of STEM careers here, from Kimberly, who is a recent graduate of the STEM program. She is currently at Rice University, so she's just embarking on her career in STEM, all the way through to some senior engineers who've had long and distinguished careers in the STEM fields. So I'd like to start by inviting our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us which STEM fields you're currently working in. Starting with you, Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Brown. I'm in Texas Instruments these days. 30 years ago, I got my engineering degree in electrical engineering. I've done various things since then, and we'll touch on those, I think, as the questions go along.
Hi, I'm Kimberly DeBruler. I'm a recent, as I said, graduate of the Dallas County STEM program just last year. And I'm currently a biochemistry major at Rice University in my junior to sophomore year, depending. And depending on who you talk to. And working in the Shamu Research Lab on bacterial antibiotic resistance.
I'm Jamie Erbs, and my college background, I was a double major actually. Started in piano performance, which that was a scholarship that paid for college, but then realized that I needed a career where I could afford to buy a piano when I graduated. So I switched to computer science and graduated with Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, and currently work at VCE, which is a cloud computing infrastructure company based here in Richardson.
Hi, my name is Debbie Bachani. I work at Texas Instruments as well as Kathy. I graduated from Texas A&M University with a computer engineering degree about 20 years ago. And I got my master's at University of Texas in business. But I did that about 5 years into my career at TI.
Okay, great, thank you. I think most of you actually, in introducing yourselves, gave us a little bit of background about your education and your pathway to your current career. Kathy, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your pathway to how you got to where you are today.
Yes, certainly. So I believe in lifelong learning, and I'm not sure what the next degree I'll get is. I got a bachelor's in electrical engineering, as I said, 30 years ago. And then about 11 years later, I got a master's in electrical engineering. And then recently, in 2008, I got an MBA. So that's a lot of degrees, but I really enjoy learning, so I wish I were in your shoes where you are today with so much in front of you. I started electrical engineering because one of the things was I read a book about designing computers and computer architecture. And that's what fascinated me at the time. And that's the first field I got into. And I think I want to encourage you to think that you might have several different tracks of your career as you go along, and to kind of start yourself in a good direction, and as you maybe discover some new things that are fun to do in engineering, because engineering is a great area with lots of new developments at all times. You might find that you want to change where you're headed. And I ended up in a business role, and that's where I am today. So about 5 years ago, I took my first business role. So without getting too involved in that, I'll tell you what I do in this business role. I run a product line, and so I'm responsible for engineering and strategy and profit and loss, and sort of the whole little mini company within TI. TI is a huge company, so it's a little bitty piece. And it's really exciting, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Okay, and Jamie, were you the piano major I'm sorry, I didn't take notes because one of my STEM scholars, Joseph, was his first degree is in piano, and he also has recently gone back to college to do a second degree. So I know he's going to want to talk to you.
I'll find you after.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. The next question I have for you is really about balance. My word of the year, I don't do New Year's resolutions because I can't stick to them, but I decided to have a word of the year this year. And my word of the year was balance, because that's something I struggle with so much. I struggle with being a good mom, a good wife, and a good professional. And sometimes I feel like I'm not good at any of them because I'm trying so hard to do all three at the same time. So if the panelists could share with us how you balance your professional life with your personal life, and maybe do you think that the trick to balancing that is harder for a woman than a man? Let's start with Kimberly.
Okay. Well, it's a good question, and one that I have probably more to say about it now than I would have a year ago. When I was a Dallas County Community College scholar, I was working full-time, going to school full-time, and there was no personal life balance. There was just no personal life. But since I have gone to Rice, I have actually met a lovely guy who has played a very supportive role, especially these last few months. And I would say to all of the young women out there, a personal life can make it harder, but it can also make it easier if it's the right person. If you have someone there who understands what you're shooting for, who wants to help you get it, and who understands that there may be days and there may be weeks where you have to pull back and not be there for them, and they have to be there for you, then I actually think that the personal life can give you some perspective and some mental relief, as long as it's the right person, and that's not always the easy part to find. Date night tomorrow night is going to be me writing a presentation and giving it to him and critiquing me. So those guys are not easy to find, but when you find them, I actually think it makes it a little bit easier.
Okay.
Such wisdom from such a young person.
There you go. Jamie?
Yeah, so, balance is tough, and I've got maybe a few more years trying to achieve that balance. And I would say that probably in my younger days, I was very driven by getting the job done and very focused on career. Not necessarily about climbing the ladder, but it was more about being very driven by creating new things. Most of my career actually was in startups, 8 startups in my background. So if you ever have the opportunity to live in a startup culture, I was in Silicon Valley actually for 8 years doing internet startups in the .com days. And it's so exciting. You just get caught up in the moment, and before you know it, you're working, literally 18-hour days, and every Sunday night was an all-nighter for me. So when you're working like that and so focused, eating, breakfast, lunch, dinner, sleeping at the office, there is no personal. Your personal life is your work life, and you tend to sometimes get drawn into that. It's very addictive,
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, I had 2 young children at the time, and I had a bit of a wake-up call there because I had a nanny at home who cooked and took care of my kids almost 24/7, and my husband was there too, trying to balance things. He was in startups, and sometimes we were in the same startup together. But my daughter, her first words were in Spanish, of which I don't speak Spanish, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as a mother, it really struck home with me that I'm just not around my daughter enough where she's learning from me. And so that was a bit of a wake-up call and caused me to kind of stop, take pause, and go, wow, I have a little girl, baby girl, and a little boy that's going into kindergarten, and they're not really getting, I'm not watching them grow up, and I'm missing out on these things. So that was a big wake-up call to me to stop and pay attention to life before life passed me by. And so that's not often a lesson that somebody can tell you about and you learn from it, but I would say that's one warning that as you move into some of these fields, depending on the company that you work for, and again, this is more an experience I had in the startup culture, But that's, that was a wake-up call. And now today, of course, my kids are older. My daughter is actually coming tonight because she's 15 and very interested in the STEM career. But today, my little balance point, my therapy is horseback riding. I jump fences. I get kind of the high risk in startups. Maybe I just like risk, but jumping fences on horses, that's what I like to do, and it's a bit of a stress relief. And I make sure that I have something to do with my animals. That's kind of my release point as well. But my daughter and I ride together. My husband, we're a riding family. But that's the thing that kind of helps me bring balance back into my life.
Thank you. Dipti, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I've got a slightly similar view, but a different. People ask all the time, how do you balance it? I have two little girls. I have an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I get the question often, how do you make it all work? How do you balance? And there is no balance. Yeah, I've tried to meet.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to do this balancing factor, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's a pendulum. It swings, right? And sometimes my family needs me, and my daughter's been sick in the past, and everything can wait at work. I don't care. I'm going to be at the hospital or wherever I need to be to help her out. And there are times when I'm on the road and it's 24/7 because I'm traveling and I'm not at home. I travel about 50% of the time internationally. And in those times, it's 100% work. And I think the challenge here is, how do you keep that pendulum moving so it doesn't get stuck one place or the other, and once in a while it hits middle, but it usually passes right by middle and never really stops in the middle. And it's about making decisions for yourself and rules for yourself. You'll also see that through your life, that pendulum will swing. When I first graduated from college, I was working 24/7, and I loved it because there were cute guys around, and it was fun to be at work, right? And I didn't have a husband at home, and when I went home, there were TV dinners. And now I want to get home as fast as I can to cook dinner for my family. And so those things will change throughout your life, and what's important and how much time you're willing to give will change. And I think you need to be adaptable to that. But make rules for yourself. Decide what is important to you. For me, I don't miss any birthdays for my kids. I'm always in the country for birthdays. When I'm in the country, I cook dinner for my family because I enjoy doing that. I feel like it's something that I get pleasure out of. And I work out every single day, whether I'm traveling or not, because that brings peace to me. And those are some of my basic rules. I think you make those for yourself and you follow them because that's important to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Kathy, do you have anything to add?
Just a little to add, very much along the lines of what Dipti said. Balance is a myth. That's my wisdom after 30 years. I chose to take a different strategy than most women that I've run into with careers. And that is, I chose to have children at a young age. I graduated at 21, and I had my first child at 25, and they are now ages 24 and 25. So I'm kind of into a new phase of balance. Mm-hmm. But when I first had the children early, I was able to give less time to career, less focus on career, and more focus on family, and that worked for me. And later I decided, I'd go back and get another degree. I'd have a fresh master's degree. No one could say, hey, you've been out of the workforce, so you don't know anything. And it did work. That strategy worked well. Immediately got hired with my master's and started to ramp up my career. So while I haven't seen too many people try that strategy, I have to say it worked for me. And maybe to add to that, I think no matter what you're doing with your balance, that you will have some regrets, and I can think of several. So forgive yourself, because it's kind of an impossible task, and keep adjusting. So now in my life, I have a husband at home, and my wonderful children are away. So I do yoga and running and art, and life is quite good.
So you're telling me I have things to look forward to, right? Wonderful, thank you. So this panel obviously is about women in STEM fields, and so one of the things I think most of the people here are interested in learning about are if there are any challenges that are unique to women in the STEM fields, maybe challenges that women encounter in STEM careers that maybe men do not. Dipti, do you have anything to say about that?
That's a difficult one. I think for me, I've chosen not to really focus on the differences between me and the men that are usually around, and not expand on that. I think the challenges are uniquely different for everyone. And the guy also has challenges too. You know, he's got kids at home that he's trying to make a basketball game to, or he's trying to coach a basketball game, the same as you do. And we're all trying to sit around this table and make it work. And so, from the standpoint of focus on what you bring to the table, be proud of what you've got, hold yourself with grace and dignity, and from the standpoint of challenges, everyone's got their unique challenges, and understand that, right? Whether you're a man or a woman, you've got your unique challenges, whether you're trying to balance a single dad or you've got a basketball game you're trying to coach, right?
Great, thank you. Jamie?
Yeah, it's a similar perspective as far as it's tough to just make generalizations about humans based on sex, you know. So, but the pattern that I've witnessed in my career through different companies is that it's less about the sex of a person; it's more about the culture of the environment. And so, working in culturally an environment that was maybe born of a military kind of hiring strategy, military based, you tend to have a stronger respect for hierarchy, title, those sorts of things. That's a very different culture that kind of breeds a little more of a rough and tough. We even had fight rooms. If you had disagreements, go into this room and fight it out, yell at each other, get it. It was a little
Where
more.
was this?
I
want a fight room.
No, for me, it didn't quite settle with me, But and then I've been in just the opposite in some of the companies that I was in, where all of the people, the men and women, very sensitive and very worried about the collaboration of everybody and the democratic nature of everybody contributing to decisions, and sometimes too much of that. We needed a little bit of dictatorship to get things done. So it kind of like that pendulum that you talked about, Dipti. It's a similar thing where you see behaviors of people that swing depending on the culture of the environment that they're in. And so it's in people that tend to have a little bit more of an aggressive trait in their personality that may be encouraged by a traditional, or I shouldn't say traditional, but a corporate environment that rewards that, versus another environment that maybe rewards a little more of the collaborative and everybody's in and very fair kind of environment. So it really is, I think, a little more of a side effect of, as far as the obstacles that you run into, it's a side effect of culture.
Great, thank you. Kimberly, have you noticed that there are different challenges for female students versus male students?
I would say on a personal level, no, but on a social and an institutional level, I think there are. I would give the example of the department that I work in as a researcher, the biochemistry department. A quick unscientific survey says that at least half, if not more than half, of the undergrad researchers are female. When you get to the graduate students, maybe 50-50. Balance is starting to shift a bit male. But you look around at the postdocs and the PIs who run the department, all male. So I have felt no discrimination because I'm a female. I have felt no personal even inkling that I couldn't handle the work because I was female. But you do realize that there are some societal pressures that are drawing women away before they get to that very highest level of achievement, the corner office in the biochemistry department. And that's not to say that you can't do it if that's what you want. People like Claire are evidence that if you want the postdoc, you can get the postdoc. It's not a challenge against you that you face that would be similar to what it was 200 years ago when there was a presumption against you. I think it's just more about, are you willing to take it all the way to the end and to, as I said, make the personal sacrifices that may be harder for women to make than men in order to get the corner office in the department, if that's what you really want. So that is my perception of it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I do quite a lot of outreach with girls of all ages, from elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and presenting at a science conference for middle school girls, right? So it's all about science. Middle school girls, just girls, no boys in the room. I'm giving, we were doing some ice cream engineering, you know, talking about using engineering to optimize ice cream, and they got to make the ice cream, eat the ice cream, you know, it was a great experience. So we're having fun, and at the end I said, okay, so who wants to be a scientist when they grow up? Not one in the room, not one of these girls. And I'm like, why? Why would you, you know, what about engineering? What about math? None of them. And if you said, okay, what do you want to do? It hadn't even occurred to them, I don't think, that they could be. And it's astonishing, really, in 2012 that you even have to have that conversation with a middle school girl. But for some reason, at some point, society maybe tells them, I don't know, that maybe it's not something that they can do. So that's interesting. So, Kathy, do you have anything to add about challenges that you may have encountered in your career because you're a woman?
I would add one thing, and that is, as a woman, you need to get along with men.
It's very true.
A lot of men. I was in a meeting with a big customer this morning. There were no other women. Dipke and I have worked in the same division for years. We have never worked in the same team. I've never worked for her.
Wireless
We got
infrastructure.
close. But you know, there aren't that many women. When I graduated, I think it was 13% of my graduating class was women. And I don't know that the numbers are all that much better now, so that would be one thing I'd offer. Another thing is I find it completely unproductive to dwell on this topic.
Yeah.
So I kind of put it behind me and try not to think about what just happened that might have been a result of me being a woman. And
No,
Yeah.
that's not so.
I had to add to what Kathy was saying. One of the things that when I first graduated from school and started at TI, I thought if I hung around with all the women that the men would just think of me as they're catty and hanging out with the women, and so I just didn't. I kept my distance from the women, and there were not many of them, and so I didn't make the proactive effort to reach out either. As I got further into my career, I realized you need your girlfriends. You need them, and Kathy and I vent with each other every once in a while, and I have my friends at work, and that's perfectly okay, and it's actually very, very healthy. And over the last few years, I've had my few girlfriends that are within the company that I reach out to and I trust implicitly, including Kathy. And the guys have it. What's wrong with us having our friends as well, right?
We have a good girl club.
We have a good girl club.
Yeah. Great.
We're sitting at the other side of the table.
Great, thank you. I think we've touched a little bit already on some different career paths. We have a piano major, we have somebody who had children first before her career. Kimberly is somewhat non-traditional student. So we have lots of different career paths in front of us here. So one of the questions I have is, have you noticed that there's a difference in career paths between men and women? Do you find that because many women take time off to have children, that maybe they don't make it as far up the career ladder as their male counterparts? Or do you think that these days, you know, the men are pulling just as much weight at home as the women are, and so it's no longer an issue? What do you think? Let's start with, well, who would like to start? Who wants to go first? Okay, Jamie, let's go with Jamie. Thank you.
So I would say not really, you know, and actually in my career path, I did retire once already. I retired after the birth of my son.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it was one of those guilt pendulum swings, you know. But I was on the trajectory up at a company called Wiltel, a telecommunications company, and we had just done our first startup in the basement, sold that company, and moved out to Silicon Valley. I thought, okay, let me just retire for a while, and I'll just take care of my son. And I did that, you know. And looking back again, probably some people would say, oh my gosh, that's a really risky move. You gave up a job where you were climbing the ladder aggressively, and why would you do that? I thought, you know, I really didn't give it a second thought, because it was more of my, you know, here's my son, I've got the opportunity, I can always go back to work, you know. And what do you know, within probably 9 months later, I had my own startup again there with my son, you know, in the background. He grew up believing his name was Casey at herbs.com. And but that's, but you know, you can do that, you know, and I think, in myself, I think my personality, again, not being so afraid to take chances, kind of led me a little bit of a different course than some people might have. But we studied this actually at one of the large corporations that I worked for, where I was a fellow. When we looked at the fellows community, there were about 300,000 people in the company, 50 fellows, and 2 of us were women. And so when you look at that statistic, you're like, what's wrong? And we studied it and looked at the progression, and we could see, you know, women in engineering and moving up the distinguished technologist path, et cetera, doing well, getting good performance reviews, et cetera. But what we saw was, in many cases, women making a choice, at least, you know, the women who you know, talented women who are moving up the chain here, all of a sudden there was a diversion, and they tended to be taking on management positions, it seemed like. And then when we started looking at some of the money, well, they actually were making more here than if they had, you know, stayed on a trajectory to become a fellow. And so it, from a financial reward perspective, at least we saw that pattern emerging in our own business, or they were getting opportunities outside the company. And so that, you know, I don't know that we never really got to a final answer as to, are we doing something wrong? Because that was our fear. Were we doing something wrong? Were we overlooking you know, qualified women who should have been promoted up a little more aggressively? But even myself at the time, even though I was a fellow, I was a VP as well, managing an organization. I had a kind of a dual role. And so I can understand this. And I don't, again, generalizations are not always a great thing, but many times it seems that many of the successful women that I've met have great organizational skills, communication skills, and this ability to lead, actually. And so maybe it's a movement away from an individual contributor engineering role and towards more of a leadership role that's happening. Meg Whitman was the CEO of HP. Pretty talented woman, you know. Would you call that a technology career, even though she's a CEO? You know, what do you label that? You know, is that a STEM career to be Meg Whitman? And I thought, I wouldn't mind being Meg Whitman. So where do you draw the line on what's success or not? And again, I think it comes back to the individual and many times what, you know, the choices that they're making. But I didn't see obstacles, you know, bottom line, and couldn't find I didn't see strong evidence to that in my own career path, nor did I directly witness it.
Great,
I've looked
thank
at
you.
that at TI as the same, because we have a very small portion of women that are business managers or VPs or senior VPs. If you look at the amount of women coming out of college versus how many women we have at those levels, the numbers are astonishing. We're losing them somewhere along the way. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is I travel 50% of the time, and most of these jobs require you to travel because it's an international business. And you know, we haven't come to the magic answer as to why that's happening and what's causing it, but these jobs are defined such that I believe there's a portion of women that are opting out to it, right? There was a study done recently that I read that despite the fact that more women are in the workforce, they still do more than 50% of the work at home. And they do majority of the work at home, despite that. And so, you know, and if you look at the men around me, most of them have stay-at-home moms. So I think, you know, there's an element of choice that's there, and I think that's healthy. But we've got to make these jobs more adaptable and adjust so that women and men can do them just as well.
My husband stays at home. It's his job. He takes care of everything at home.
Great. Kathy?
No, I've really nothing to add. I witnessed the same things that Jenny so eloquently put. We lose women along the way, and we lose men along the way in engineering too. And I'm not sure I understand it.
That's true. Kimberly, do you have anything to add to that?
I think that the concept that's coming up is choice, and I would say that is true. I'd say the key is to be happy with the choice you make. If it's the choice to step away, be sure that you're making it for the right reasons, and realize that you can step away and step back. That's what I did. I did not go to college full steam straight out of high school. I had family issues, and I spent time taking care of my family. And you know, at a certain point when it became more viable for me, I went back into college full steam And now I have flipped over to the side where, as they said, the pendulum has swung, and it has swung all the way back the other way. And now it's college and career and just run as far and as fast as you can. But I know that at some point it will, and I'm hoping it swings back the other way. I want the family and the life and all of those things too. But for me, it was a matter of accepting, that is the choice you made, and now you make a different choice. And I think that's the only thing that I really had to add to the discussion.
Yeah, I think from a personal standpoint, things I've learned over the years is, as Kimberly just said, you can make a choice and then you can change your mind at a later time. Jamie said she retired and then she changed her mind, right? And that happens, and that's okay. I actually was working for a startup company when my daughter was born, and as Jamie was talking earlier about that crazy startup culture, I remember I was in labor with my daughter in a meeting thinking, please don't let my water break in front of these men. That's how crazy it was. And I knew that I had a certain amount of time before I needed to go to the hospital, but goodness, I wasn't going until I had finished this job. That's how totally crazy that culture is. And so I had my daughter and fully expected to be back to work pretty much immediately. And unfortunately, it was 2002, and I think most people know what happened to the tech bubble in 2002. It burst, and I was actually laid off while I was on maternity leave and thought, this is the end of the world. And then I thought, maybe the universe is trying to tell me something. I have this newborn baby. I'm suddenly laid off. Why don't I just stay home for a bit? And loved it so much. 4.5 years later, I thought, maybe I need to go back to work. I managed to squeeze in having another child during that 4.5, because I'm nothing if not practical. So like, if I'm at home, let's have another one, get it over with. And so had two, and then, but the whole time I was home, part of me was terrified that I had completely scuppered my career. I'd worked so hard to get the PhD and the postdoc and was earning a lot of money in a startup company, and suddenly thought, what if that's it? What if nobody will ever hire me again because I've taken this time to be with my family? And I remember walking into the DCCD Adjunct Faculty Career Fair and 2 deans standing up and fighting over who was going to get me to go teach as an adjunct faculty. And I thought, well, okay, I guess I didn't write off my career. I guess I'm still valuable to society. And so haven't looked back since. So just because you take some time out to raise your family doesn't mean that's the end. You can go back and I feel like I'm having a second career. Well, I am. It's a completely different career, and it's incredibly fulfilling. So it's worked out very well for me. Okay, same vein, same type of question. Have you noticed over the years that you're maybe not taken as seriously as your male counterparts, either in a meeting or maybe in a college class? Do you have any experience of that, or any examples of not being taken as seriously? Or clearly you're all such accomplished, amazing women that, woe betide the man who doesn't take you seriously, I think. But have you had any experience of that? And let's start with Kathy.
Well, I would say rarely, but I was able to think of a circumstance.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare now that I'm at a level that I'm at. People do anticipate that you know a few things. But on occasion, the classic thing can happen where you say something. I was in a very large meeting. This was OMAP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And lot of very big personalities in this meeting, and I made a point, and I made it a second time, and then I just sat back. Later, a man made that point, and another man seconded it, and a third, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But that's pretty rare. And it only happened in a case where there were just some huge personalities in the room. And again, I would say I just try to ignore these things as much as I can, because that's probably the most productive way.
Mm-hmm. Kimberly?
On the whole, I would say no. There are always little things that happen that you wonder about. I was in a lab meeting a few weeks ago, and we were all bashing around ideas for how to solve a problem, a very tricky engineering problem. How do you get something out of a closed container without opening it, basically? And so everybody in the lab was batting around ideas, and I threw something out there and kind of came and went, and the conversation kept going. And at a certain point down the line, our PI, or the professor that's in charge of the lab, was reviewing the ideas we had and accidentally assigned my idea to the male postdoc. And so he said, okay, well, Troy said this. And I was thinking to myself, no, he didn't. But I don't know if that was the fact that Troy's male or the fact that Troy's the postdoc. And the automatic assumption was that he was filing all the good ideas under the postdoc.
Yeah.
So maybe I took it as a compliment. I would say, generally speaking, I have felt no overt discrimination in my path in science, which I'm very happy to say.
Good. Jamie?
Yeah, I've the cases that I've run across, again, kind of went back to a little more of a cultural predisposition. And what I mean is, when you're traveling to other parts of the world, and you probably see this in some cultures in other parts of the world, there may be a disadvantage. And discrimination, that might be the word, but it's there. Yeah, it exists out there, but in the United States and in the field that I'm in the industry that I'm in, I have not really. I did witness it early in my career, in my 30s, and it was I would see cases all the time and have comments that were made, and things that were said. But oh, you get to go to the board meeting because you have pretty lips. I was actually told that once.
Wow.
They want you to be there because you have pretty lips. Oh, great. But that was when I was 20-something. They don't say that today. But I think I would turn this back around a little bit to you and say, just to put this, something that you take away from this. Be very sensitive to the people that are in your midst, and when you're in these group settings, when you're in meetings like this, I don't know that it's necessarily men, women, but it's a little more of the strong personality type, the extrovert that's in a meeting, and sometimes a tendency to be very overbearing or to be that, listen to me type personality, and then the introvert who, when they speak, you better listen. Because they may be very quiet for a while, but when they say something, man, it's going to be good, So I would just say maybe watch for those personality types, because that's going to be the key to success, is taking the input and the ideas from all people, and recognizing when you're getting the overbearing, strong personality syndrome in the room versus watching out for the talent that comes through quietly and softly, but very good idea that's coming through there.
Yeah. And Dipti?
Most of mine, I've been working at the company now 18 years, and you get to a point where people know who you are, and they know your reputation, and they know what you've been able to do. So I don't see that dismissal or anything of that sort. But as I travel internationally, and as our companies are becoming more worldwide, I see more of that. In certain cultures, they won't look you in the eye. It's just the oddest thing, because I'm doing this thing, right? It's like, is he looking over my shoulder, or where is he looking, right? But that's just their culture. It's not disrespect. It's just how their cultures operate. I do remember one time when I was in France, and the French are interesting in their culture as well. And I'm sitting in a meeting, and I'm presenting our technology and what we have to offer. And the CEO walks abruptly into the meeting, and everyone stands up like a god had walked in. And he sits down, and everybody's like, all tense, because the CEO never attends any of these meetings. And he stops me abruptly and says, "Is she serious? What are you doing? Are you really selling this stuff?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he goes, "Well, you shouldn't be selling this stuff." And I said, "What should I be selling?" And he says, "Cosmetics or something like that. This is not you." Oh. And I said, I don't know the first thing about selling cosmetics, but I do know how to sell this stuff, and you seem to like it. So let's keep going, right? And I got through the whole presentation, and at the end he says, Are you available tonight? Can we? Are you available for dinner tonight?" I'm thinking, is this guy serious? No, I'm flying out tonight, but I'll leave you with a portfolio of all the products that we have at TI and see how you can use them. They're actually a customer of ours, and we make good business. We do good business with them. But it's just those things are going to happen. They're not your fault. They're not your problem. It's his.
Yeah.
Let him bear the weight
Yeah.
and deal with his issues.
Yeah.
It's not yours to deal with. Move on.
Yeah.
Handle it with grace and dignity, and hold your shoulders up high, and we'll walk out.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's not a women-only problem.
Yeah.
I have witnessed that,
Male egos tend to
men
collide
have,
too.
but I've heard men that have had some of that from women, so it goes both ways, really.
Yeah, it can, certainly. Great, thank you. We're kind of going to start talking about you guys more a little bit now, and I'd like to talk to the panel and have them give you some advice on how you can prepare to transition to a four-year university or transition to the workforce. And I'd like to start with Kimberly, since she most recently transferred to a four-year university from Brookhaven to Rice. So Kimberly.
Okay, well, this is where I can really help you. Okay. Number one, do not overload your first semester at a university. It is exciting and it is tempting. And I did 21 hours my first semester, and that was a mistake. Okay, I'm going to tell you that right now. Take 15 hours, period. Or less. Whatever works for you, do not overload. Do not burn out. The other one is that this is another little inside tip, and I've taught to students at different universities and across departments. The honors classes can be easier in sciences. You get the best professors. You get a smaller class, and you generally get more project-based rather than test-based grading. So it's about what you can figure out and what you can get done rather than what you can memorize under pressure during finals.
That's good advice.
So, look very, very carefully at the syllabuses. Minimize the number of finals you have to take. Maximize the number of projects you get to do. It makes it easier, it makes it more fun. You get to learn more, and you get to know professors and students in your field better. Let's see, there was a third thing I wanted to say. Those are the two biggies, but enjoy the experience. Realize that part of going off to college is letting the world open up in front of you a bit. And a lot of what I have learned at Rice is not the stuff that they assign tests on. It is, as they said, how to work in science. That has been the biggest education so far at Rice. It is very different than, a Gen Chem lab, where I'll give you the hint, everything has been designed to work exactly right by your lovely professors. Once you dive out into the world of actual science, it does not work the way it's supposed to work, ever, the first time. And all of the things that are written down on paper or that you find when you Google, someone in your lab knows a better way. The one thing I have learned about science is it is all about talking. There's a reason scientists invented the internet. If somebody somewhere in your lab has figured out a better, quicker, faster, easier way to do it, there's no award for martyrdom. Go find them and ask and make them explain to you how to do it. That is the thing that I have learned, and that is something that they don't tell you in science class, which is you learn more by asking, by knocking on doors. A lot of times when it comes to doing new and innovative work than you do trying to search through textbooks or drag stuff up on the internet. So those are my three pieces of advice. Honors classes, don't overload. Knock on all the doors.
And I don't know if you mentioned this in your introduction or if I mentioned it, but when Kimberly transferred to Rice, she sought out a professor who she wanted to work with and asked if she could work in his research lab. Do you want to talk just for a couple of minutes about how you got a gig in a research lab?
Sure. This is where one of the reasons I got the gig in the research lab is STEM. It really is. I could walk in there and point to my participation in this program and say, look, I'm really serious about this. he actually liked the fact that I came from a community college. He had had a previous student who had been in the military, then started a degree at community college and come and worked in his lab and was actually very well disposed to the concept in the community college system. So I would say, A, do not assume that coming from a community college works against you. I have found that anything that sets you apart actually works in your favor. It makes you stand out. It's easier to grab the application out of the pile that's not like all the others. The other thing is, you do need to learn how to be comfortable with talking to adults.
Wow. Old people, right?
I'm 27. Okay, I can drink, I can vote, I can run for president in 8 years, but I don't necessarily feel like an adult, but you know,
Nor do we.
It's true.
You do have to be comfortable presenting what it is you can do, and also at the same time being humble about what you can't. That's the knocking on doors. That's the accept that you're not going to come in there and stun everyone with your incredible depth of knowledge about how to clone things. You don't have any knowledge at all about how to clone things. And when you accept that and admit it, you're better off. But what you can do is come in and present your desire to be in the field, your knowledge of the field. If you're going to go knock on a professor's door and say, I want to work in your lab, you better have read all the papers that lab published. You need to look up the professor's educational background to see what their interests are. You know, in my particular case, his interests are protein and evolutionary mechanisms and how mutations affect outcomes through protein. He likes crystallizing protein structures. You need to know all of that when you walk in the door. You don't need to know how to clone. You don't need to know how to do research, but you do need to know what kind of lab you're walking into. That's something that someone in a position of authority to assign these jobs respects. They are not going to give you the job if you just walk in there and sit down and say, hey, look, I really need lab work to put on my medical school application. Can I have a job?
Yeah.
The answer to that is going to be no. If you come in and say, I'm really interested in the work you're doing, I find it fascinating, I've looked at these papers and I think that I would like to learn how to do this and be a part of this, then that's how you get the job.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to ask the other panelists what advice you would give to our STEM students as they are preparing to interview for their first STEM job. Let's start with Dipti at the end.
As you go to work for an interview, it's been a long time since I did my first interview, but I do interview a lot of candidates myself. And I'll tell you, your grades speak for yourself, speak for your brilliance. You are brilliant, and we already know it if we're speaking to you. So you'll get the standard questions on trying to make sure that you know what you're talking about. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to assess is your softer skills. Can you work in a team meeting? Are you going to be able to work well with others? Do you have confidence in your opinions, but yet you're still adaptable to the environment that I have? So I'm looking for all of those things. I want to know that you can learn, because I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. But I want to make sure that you can, the personality stuff is hard to build, right? It comes from within, and that's what I'm looking for. So in that interview, demonstrate that. You seek opportunities to demonstrate your softer skills, the skills of being able to work across the organization and in team environments. And you can do it by the questions you ask, the way you hold yourself, how you interact with others that you're interviewing with. I watch the team dynamics as people are coming in and how they interact with each other. Those things are important, and those are really what I'm assessing, because I can. You've got the degree, you've got the grades, and I can teach you the other stuff.
Yeah.
Great, Jamie.
Yeah, I actually resonate with both. The advice that Kimberly had about, know who you're speaking to and be prepared with a conversation that will incentivize them to get to want to know you better even. I mean, that plays exactly the same for any job interview that you do. The more you know about the company that you're walking into, the more that you even know. I mean, Google gives us a lot
Yeah,
today, right?
absolutely.
Mm.
You know, you go out there and research, you know, put somebody's name out there and see what you learn, because the more you know about the person you're about to interact with, and they're, especially if they're the decision maker, that impression that you can make is just so critical. But I will say, I, as a hiring manager, I can't remember some of my interviews, but as a hiring manager, I've been in many different situations and staffing for many different situations. And when you enter your career, you will, you know, I hope, have an understanding of the kind of career that you wish to have. For example, one in research. I was a director of research at HP Labs, and staffing there. You know, of course, the resume was the easy part, because, you know, if it wasn't a PhD, then it wasn't even coming to me, right? But it was very much driven on you know, as far as the getting an entry into the interview even was all about how many accomplishments were on the resume. The CV was everything. It was 5 pages of papers and conference speaking, and, you know, lots of bulk behind it. And that was what was necessary with the kinds of research projects that we led, at least in that corporate engineering or research field. However, in my startup experience, it was all about the team, you know, because I had to have a balance of some of the, and I would look at some tendencies. The straight A student who tended to know, this is what I need to check the box on, you know, to understand, to get my A, to get, you know, to reach this goal, I need to do all these things. Very disciplined people. And then sometimes the very creative types, ultra creative types, maybe weren't the straight A ones, because they were, I mean, here, this bright shiny thing, and look at that bright shiny thing, and oh, homework, you know. So they didn't always necessarily have the straight A. So I didn't use, you know, just the GPA as the tool for determining, you know, team building, but would often look for kind of a balance, you know, in building that team, and look for people that had created in that position. Where had they built things? Where did they have hobbies? Where they invented or created things on the side? Whether it were guys that, you know, had their own hobbies of building their own garage band out of, you know, the systems that they put together and instruments that they would interface in. Hobbies like that actually resulted in kind of a creative output. Because in a startup where you're always looking for new invention, innovation that you want to try to take to market, when you can build a very diverse team, then it's you tend to get better results than if you build a team of people that all think the same way and behave the same way. So diversity, I think, is kind of the key takeaway. So again, kind of that, how can you make yourself different and stand out? Many times a hiring manager is looking for, in building a diverse team, how do I add some diversity and different perspectives into the team that I'm creating? So that's one of my
Okay,
there.
great, thank you. We're almost out of time, so Kathy, do you have anything to add to that,
I
briefly?
was going to take it in a different direction. I'll be brief.
Okay, thank you.
How do you pick a company you're going to be comfortable working for as a woman
Mm.
in a technology field? And I had a little experience with this, so I'll compare and contrast. A company I did not enjoy working in as a woman was a company, it's run by a Japanese corporate entity, and I'm not going to name it because, why not? And I didn't see any women at the top. Of course, it's a very male field, so that there weren't that many women around, but the whole atmosphere about women being leaders was kind of missing from this company. And if I contrast that with TI, where I've been very pleased, it's a top company for women to work in the top 50 is regularly mentioned. What does that look like? What are you looking for in terms of comfort level? First of all, you can see women around. There are women in higher ranks. And they also have diversity initiatives for lots of different types of diversity, including women. And it's just been a really welcoming place to be. And so I do a little homework around that as well to see if you'd be comfortable working at a job there.
Great, thank you. As I said, we're almost out of time, and I know the scholars are going to have a chat with our keynote speaker at 5 o'clock in this room, so I don't want to overstay in the room, but I would love to open the floor briefly, maybe have time for a couple of questions. So does anyone have a question for anyone on the panel? Cece?
I am having perhaps some trouble dealing with my friends, with my women friends that are not, I'm older and more established than most women here. but I'm having trouble dealing with my friends that do not quite understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Do you have any advice on how to deal with women that actually perhaps don't think that you're doing the best thing with life at this point by choosing a career in engineering?
My daughter didn't really like what I was doing, and my sons, neither of them took up engineering, so I think I kind of get your point. She would say to me, Mom, I don't understand the technology. Why aren't you helping people?
Yeah.
I think this is the root of why some women don't go into engineering or science. They don't see that direct connection that maybe in the medical field that's pretty obvious, but other technology don't. So I guess I have to respect her opinion. However, I mean, I just love what I'm doing in the technology, and what I try to demonstrate for people is how that technology is helping others. So when I was in the cell phone technology business for a long, long time. And cell phones enable people who are in a disaster zone to talk to their relatives and loved ones, and try to bring it home in a way that other women can kind of see why you might be doing that. And I think that sort of involves how are you helping others. And you can get there. It might be a couple steps.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Joe, go ahead.
Was there ever a point in your careers, and maybe Kimberly, you for you as well, was there ever a point that you regretted choosing to move into a STEM field? Maybe on one of the downswings of the pendulum?
I can actually speak to this in a strange way. Not anticipatory regret, I think. The question of will this cost me the family life? Will this cost me, the husband and my kids? Where is the time for that in the next? I'm planning to go to medical school. I've got 2 years more at Rice, 4 years of medical school, internship, residency. I want to be a surgeon. It's going to be a long road. And at this point, I'm 27. There is not time for me to step off again. I must keep going. And so the question of where does a life and the family and children fit into that road is very, very much open. And it is something that I question. And I do want that. And I will regret it if this costs me that. I am hoping that it will work itself out. And it won't, and I will get both and live happily ever after. But that's not life, and you do pick your poison. And I have picked this.
Yeah, I would say, I mentioned, the episode with my daughter, that was a regret point, that it wasn't because I entered a science or technology field. It was because I was in a very, aggressive startup life in Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
And so, but it wasn't the science and technology aspect at all.
Yeah, and I think that all of the women on the panel are so successful and so driven, even if they weren't in the STEM field, there would be the same level of regret. I know I suffer from mommy guilt, but if I worked in banking, I would still suffer from mommy guilt. It's not because I'm a scientist that I have that problem. Yes?
Yes, ladies, I would like to know, what advice would you have for someone that's been out of school 30 years, just now getting back on the grid, and I'm trying to get into working with animals, doing research. What advice would you have? Because I feel so old, right? But I feel like it's something I want to do, and I'm going to do it. I've always been one that if I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it regardless, however long it takes. But what advice do you have?
You would like to take that?
Stick with it.
Yeah.
There are no regrets. No, I admire you for what you're doing, and choosing to at any age, right? Age is just a number. It's in your mind. You're still got energy and you're healthy. Make the best of it. Don't let that hold you back. It's only in your head. It really, honestly, if you put your mind to it, just like you said, you'll get there. And no one's gonna. I wouldn't think about it twice as an age thing.
That and
Exactly.
the internet, I think, is the great equalizer. because there's somewhat, I don't know if you guys have witnessed that, but there are a lot of people that have built their own personal brand and built up careers by this massive network that they've kind of created, and using the internet as that vehicle. And they're, I mean, who knows how old anybody is, or what sex they are, or what color they are, or, you know, if they have hair or not. None of that matters, you know. I mean, and it shouldn't matter anyway in person. But the fact is that people can get out there, and you can now go many different ways at once, and you can use the internet as a multiplier of the work that you do. So whether writing, you know, getting out there and getting blogs, getting yourself, building your own brand, I think your personal brand will enable you to accelerate your presence in the field.
Great, thank you. I know we're having a great discussion here, but I'm very aware of the time. We're actually a couple of minutes over our time limit right now. So if you do have any further questions for our panelists, I encourage you to catch them later. I think, are you all staying for dinner, ladies?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So please come talk to us. We'd love to speak to you. And I would just like to say, once again, thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today. It was great. Thank you.